Chapter 5. 10 kilograms of sweet potatoes would barely sustain 2 people for a few days. The new grain for this year had yet to arrive, and Xiao Tajin was definitely going to seek out Lu Fan upon his return. However, will the Xiao family forgive Xiaolan? Lu Fan was contemplating a visit to her mother's family tomorrow to explore options, though the Lu family was also struggling financially. Xiaolan's uncle, despite being poor, was generous and would not allow his niece to suffer from hunger. As she was assessing their situation, Xiaolan returned with a bundle of dry branches, her eyes sparkling as she suggested roasting sweet potatoes. Seeing her in such high spirits, Lu Fan was willing to endure even more hardship. "All right, I will roast you some sweet potatoes." However, when Xiaolan set the firewood aside, she revealed the wild duck eggs. Lu Fan felt a surge of happiness. These eggs, roughly the size of regular eggs, appeared to have been gathered from the reed. With these duck eggs, Xiaolan could nourish herself, as she had become so thin that a gust of wind could easily knock her over, which pained Lu Fan's heart. "I'll cook you another duck egg," Lu Fan offered. The old, dilapidated house lacked proper cooking utensils, but in rural areas, using an enamel jar to boil an egg was perfectly acceptable. However, Xiaolan stopped her mother, saying, "We can't eat the duck eggs right now. Our future depends on these wild duck eggs. The villagers are preoccupied with the grain in the fields and won't have time to cut the reeds. I need to find more wild duck eggs to sell in the city. Tonight, we should head to the reeds. It would be great to catch a couple of wild ducks." Lu Fan had never engaged in such activities before. The Xiao family all live under the same roof, and the eggs they usually saved were taken to the city by her mother-in-law and sister-in-law for sale. The journey from Day Village to the county town takes about 2 hours, so people typically do not venture to the city without a compelling reason. But Xiaolan was good at arguing and Lu Fan couldn't outtalk her, and she was accustomed to obedience. Lu Fan found herself unable to refute her daughter. After both mother and daughter ate a sweet potato, Lu Fan realized that to sell duck eggs in the city, they would require at least 2 baskets. She hurried outside to gather some reed poles and did 2 small baskets. "These won't last more than a month since we lack proper tools and they haven't been soaked," she remarked. Lu Fan placed the reed baskets in the river, weighted down by a stone, feeling somewhat dissatisfied with her handiwork. However, Xiaolan saw it as a form of craftsmanship that neither Xiaolan in the future nor current Xiaolan able to do. That night, the mother and daughter prepared to venture out as egg thieves after finishing their baskets and catching up on some sleep. There was no lock on the door and can only be propped using wood. There was also no bed on, so Xiaolan laid clean reed poles on the ground. Thankfully, it was August, otherwise, the dilapidated house would have been unbearably cold. Without an alarm clock, Xiaolan was stirred from her slumber by the sound of rustling. Lu Fan had already retrieved the reed baskets from the river. "Sleep a bit longer, I'll go look for them first," Lu Fan said. The sharpness of the reed leaves made a burning cuts on the skin, which explained why no one had collected the wild duck eggs left in the area. Lu Fan was reluctant for her daughter to endure such hardships, as Xiaolan had always been somewhat delicate and not accustomed to much farm work. Xiaolan shook her head in response. "We should go together. Having 2 people would make the search quicker and safer, especially since they lacked a flashlight and could only rely on the moonlight." Fortunately, the moon was bright that night, promising a sunny day ahead. With their small baskets in hand, Xiaolan and her mother diligently searched in secluded areas. As they approached the reeds, they spotted some ducks nearby. Upon encountering a patch of reeds, they startled some wild ducks, which took flight. When they found the first duck nest, it turned out to be empty and their activity already startled the dogs in the nearby barn. Old Wang, who was overseeing the cowshed, became alerted and called out, "Who's there?" The torchlight flickered as Lu Fan shielded Xiaolan behind her, responding awkwardly, "Uncle, it's me. I'm just collecting a few duck eggs to nourish the child." "Tajin's family?" Old Wang scrutinized the mother and daughter whose head full of grass clippings. The entire village of Day was aware of Xiaolan being kicked out from her home. Old Wang disliked Xiaolan even before all those rumors, for she never greeted the elderly in the village, thus being disrespectful. But this Lu Fan was quite pitiful. Seeing the blood-stained bandage Xiaolan's forehead, he reconsidered and handed the flashlight to Lu Fan, saying, "Return it to me tomorrow." Lu Fen's eyes glistened with gratitude. Xiaolan reflected that not everyone in Day Village was unkind, and she expressed her sincerity. "Thank you, Uncle Wang." Old Wang appeared taken aback by her gratitude, glanced at Xiaolan, and then returned to the barn with his dog, leaving the mother and daughter to continue their search. With the aid of the flashlight, they explored the area where the duck nests were located. After several hours of searching, they managed to collect 70 or 80 wild duck eggs in their 2 reed baskets, though Lu Fen remained somewhat bewildered. In addition to the eggs, they also discovered a nest of ducklings that had already hatched. "It can be raised," she remarked. Lu Fen felt quite happy that all the hairs in her body fuzzed. Xiaolan thought of the dilapidated house that Dieter's gentleman but attracts scoundrels, shaking her head and said, "What if we raise them and other took advantage of it, better to sell them as well." Lu Fen was a bit reluctant. However, both she and Xiaolan had problems in providing for themselves. Raising a few wild ducks was indeed too eye-catching. They went home and meticulously examined the eggs one by one. In addition to the 12 Xiaolan had previously collected, they had a total of 82 unhatched eggs. Unable to wait for dawn, Xiaolan and Lu Fen set off for the city together, taking 2 roasted sweet potatoes for their meal for today. The first time Anne ate the roasted sweet potato, she felt it delicious and refreshing. Felt novel and wild. Ate them the second time, she was quite unhappy. Fortunately, having endured much hardship in her childhood, she was able to cope with their current situation. Had she been a pampered beauty, she likely would have gone crazy on the very first day. Survive, she need to survive in this era before she could afford to dream of a better life. Holding on to this belief, Xiaolan hurried along, arriving in the county as dawn broke. Day Village was impoverished, while Qing'an County had a slightly better economic foundation, featuring a large meat factory and an agricultural machinery factory that employed many workers. The cattle raised in Day Village were sold to the meat factory. Although workers at the meat factory could usually obtain some meat, purchasing eggs was a different matter. In the township surrounding Anqing County, there were more pigs and cattle than poultry. Where should we sell them? The 2 major factories in Anqing County had workers with disposable income, and the black market thrived around these establishments. Lu Fen suggested that it would be more advantageous to sell near the meat factory, where the workers had money to spend. However, Xiaolan proposed a different approach. "Let's take a look around the agricultural machinery factory." The agricultural machinery factory employed a large number of workers, and Xiaolan was quite familiar with such establishments. As they approached the factory at dawn, they noticed workers arriving on bicycles. Xiaolan observed several individuals by the roadside, seemingly engaged in selling goods. Some were holding chickens, while others carried freshly harvested sweet potatoes, and notably, there were no competitors selling eggs that day. After finding a suitable spot, a woman with a bag of vegetables approached and inquired, "Are you selling chicken eggs?" Xiaolan responded without hesitation, "I have fresh wild duck eggs available, and I can offer them to you at a lower price than chicken eggs." Wild duck eggs were comparable in size to chicken eggs, and if they were indeed cheaper, it was a great opportunity for buyers, regardless of their taste. The market price for chicken eggs were around 1.2 yuan per half kilo with food stamps. Without food stamps, farmers typically sell them for 1.5 yuan. Xie had gathered this information through polite conversation, and her friendly demeanor made it easy for her to find out the pricing from other vendors. Noticing that the woman seemed interested but hesitant, Xiaolan continued, "If you buy less than 10, it's 1.3 cents each, if you buy 10 or more, it's 1.2 cents each, if you buy more than 20, it's 1.1 cents each." Her tiered pricing strategy made the older woman somewhat perplexed. Recognizing a good deal, the woman decided to purchase 21 eggs, demonstrating a woman's wisdom in finding cheap bargain without spending too much. Xiaolan received 2.3 yuan and discounted the 0.1 cent. She handed the money to Lu Fen, who was in a daze. Meanwhile, several nearby vendors were observing Xiaolan, intrigued by her charm and unexpected success in sales.